would like to introduce our next speaker. He's been a long-time researcher into UFOs, extraterrestrials, and crop formations. Usually, a person is very much into one of these areas, more seldom both. So we are very interested in hearing his insights and experiences and information that Alan Foster is going to give us today. Okay, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Is it coming out? Yeah, okay. Right, hello everybody. So just to give you an idea of my background before I start the presentation, my name is Alan Foster. I'm a writer, researcher and lecturer on UFOs, crop formations, environmental and spiritual issues. I've been studying this subject for over 39 years now, since I had a UFO encounter in April 1973, strangely enough as I was returning from my confirmation into the church. I've worked in various industries, including 18 years in the airline industry, some of that working as a manager of an airline operation that provided the commercial transport for the US military. I was the UK manager and then the Mediterranean manager of the commercial airline travel operation working with the military. I currently work in aircraft operations at an international airport. Now, as for regarding crop formations, I've been studying those in depth for the last 18 years. I live fairly close to where the main formations are appearing in southern Britain. So it's fairly easy. Within an hour and a half I can get to some of the most amazing formations. So I've studied this in depth, as I say, for 18 years and worked with one of the leading research groups back in the 1990s that were looking into this, also in a scientific level as well. So the title of this talk today is Crop Formations, Message for Humanity. And in a way I think that's what they are. Now, as you're fully aware of this subject, I'm sure, there is a huge hoaxing element to this that's been going on. But what I would regard as the genuine formations are quite incredible. They involve not just complex geometry and advanced mathematics, but messages that relate to SETI communications, to life forms, to various different things such as prophecy and predictions, as well as religious and spiritual symbols as well, which have been appearing. So the feeling is, when you look at the genuine reality of this, is that there has been a communication going on, trying to give people an opportunity to wake up to the fact that something big is going on here, and that we are at this pivotal time, this transition time on Earth, and that we do have sort of help and guidance from these type of communications. Now, as I say, I'm sure most of you in here are familiar with crop formations, but this current era began basically from the late 80s and then moving into the early 90s, where they started off as simple circles and circles with rings, but then becoming more elaborate into the 1990s, when, particularly when this particular formation appeared in 1990 at a place called Eastfield in Alton Barnes in Wiltshire. Now, again, this was stepping it beyond those sort of simple circles and starting to become formations. But even this one, as you can see, is fairly simple. And yet I'll show you some, as this presentation goes on, that are so complex in their geometry and mathematics that you'll realise there is no way could you create these using ropes and planks of wood during the middle of the night. But it was when this one appeared in 1990 that more and more people started to take an interest in the fact that, you know, something was going on here. So people started travelling around the world from various different places to start studying this. This is also when mainstream scientific research began from 1990 onwards and actually continues up to the present day. Now, there was a group called the BLT group, which stands for the initials of the people that were part of that, from John Burke, Dr. William Levingood, who was a biophysicist, and Nancy Talbot. Now, they themselves use professional scientific consultants, people like biophysicists, analytical chemists, geologists, geochemists and mineralogists. So did serious research looking into these. And what they found is that the crop in the genuine formations seems to go through a change in its cellular structure. It's as though the crop itself is being superheated and any moisture within the crop turns to steam, and then the image can be downloaded because the crop becomes more malleable, and the images are downloaded probably only in a matter of seconds, the genuine formations. They also see that with that, and you saw this last night with that, the DVD last night, that you actually have a change in the elongation of the nodes. You can see here, compared to the normal control samples. And what happens is, in some of the formations, there is a bending of the node, like at a 90-degree angle, sometimes a foot off the ground. So this, again, you couldn't do if you were just crushing it with ropes and planks of wood. And you get this elongation, but even sometimes sort of expulsion cavities where the steam blows out. So they know that this is part of that superheating process. But there are also magnetic anomalies as well. Many of the formations that you go into, they'll actually affect, for instance, a compass, where the compass will spin wildly when you're within the formation, but then works normally as you come out. And batteries in cameras often fail within genuine formations. Once again, they work okay when they're outside. And I've actually spoken to people from the BBC that have done documentaries on this, with very expensive cameras where they've gone into the formations and the batteries completely fail. But once they come back out again, they actually still work. So there is this energy component to the genuine formations, which has been seen, including with dowsing and things like that. That once again you wouldn't have if this was just normal ropes and planks of wood. In fact, even some of the researchers who've flown helicopters over the formations, they've found that as the helicopter flies over a formation, the instruments go erratic in the helicopter, and then as they fly beyond it, they clear up again and it's back to normal. So they know that in some cases the energy dome is huge. It can be, tens of meters into the sky and probably going into the earth as well. Now, moving on, in 1991 this formation appeared just below the ancient hill fort called Barbary Castle, which is just south of Swindon in Wiltshire. Now, the night that appeared, there were a group of people doing a night watch, and they said that during the night they saw a large triangular UFO hovering over a field, shining a beam of light down. So the following day they went back to have a look at that particular location and came across this formation. Now, their general feeling was that what it was trying to portray was the fact that there should be a balance between mind, body and spirit, which of course there should be. Now, what is interesting about this particular formation, this is when they were starting to become more elaborate as the early 90s began and moving onwards. This is actually referred to by Carlos Diaz. Once again, I'm sure you're familiar with him, the guy from Tepoztlan in Mexico, south of Mexico City, that's been seeing this object, or objects plural, for 20 odd years, from 1981 when he took this particular picture. He's taken many photographs and film of this beautiful object. It's known as the jellyfish craft for obvious reasons, but it's believed to be plasma made from energy, a highly advanced thinking, sentient, organic technology beyond just sort of metallic technology, as if that wasn't impressive enough. But this is why this subject is incredibly multifaceted. Now, what's interesting is several times he had interactions with the beings from this craft, and in fact there are at least 12,000 eyewitnesses within that area that acknowledge having seen this object. So many people have seen this. But he had interactions with the beings from it, and sometimes he saw them as human, and other times as beings of light. On several occasions, he was actually taken in the craft and taken inside large cavern systems, which he believed were in the mountains. And on one occasion, when he was actually filming this, he's standing on a high level within this cavern, and one of these objects, which is possibly 10 metres to 30 metres across, was below him, hovering in the cavern below him. And below that, there was an image, either projected or literally carved on a rock below that UFO, of the same image you just saw with that crop formation, that triangular formation. He, once again, felt very strongly that it was relating to the balance between mind, body and spirit. And so once he saw that formation, of course, to him, that was really important. This incident occurred, that was on the 11th of January 1998, so it was after the formation had appeared, but clearly to them this was a significant image. Now, Many of you have seen this, I'm sure. This is an incredible formation that appeared on Sunday, the 27th of July 1996. And this is an amazing formation, particularly because it appeared during the middle of a busy Sunday afternoon with nobody seeing how it actually appeared. Now, as you can see, this is below one of the beautiful stone areas in the UK, in southern UK, which is Stonehenge up here. Now, this is the busy A303 road below it with traffic passing, and this appeared basically without anybody seeing what had actually happened. There are witnesses to say that this appeared really quickly. There are some security guards that were doing their rounds of Stonehenge, and from there, as you go around, you can look down onto the road and the field below, and they said there was nothing there. About 30 minutes later, they came back once again and walked around the site and then looked down and saw this huge formation. This formation, if you straighten it out, is about 900 feet in length, which is probably, 250, 280 metres, with 193 different circles. But there was also a pilot of a light aircraft that was flying people around the ancient sites to show people the ancient sites. Stonehenge here, and further north is Avebury Stone Circle. So he was flying people around, showed them Stonehenge, there was nothing there. He landed at a nearby airfield, refueled, brought some more people back to look at the ancient sites. He returned about 20 minutes later, and as he flew around now, he saw this huge formation. He said there's no way was that there before, because he would have seen it, as would have the passengers as well. Now, what's interesting is that the people that surveyed that formation, looking at how the crop is flowing, whether it's clockwise, anti-clockwise, various aspects which I'll sort of highlight later on as well, it took them at least 4 hours to survey the formation. So it was showing that once again that the genuine formations, it's believed that they actually appear probably in a matter of seconds, sort of downloading into the crop. And you've certainly seen that film footage of the balls of light flying around the field, where the image downloads, like literally downloads into the crop. That was back in 1996. And another thing, we saw that footage not long after it had been filmed, before it was then sort of debunked in the media. And the original footage shows two of those balls of light flying away from the field, passing through a hedge, through another field, and then passing through another hedge going on into the distance. That is usually cropped out in the footage that you see. So to us, when we saw that, and we realised that this just felt right, this is how the genuine formations were appearing, but also that the technology was able to pass through the solid matter of the hedges without being affected. Now, this is impressive. This is actually based on the golden mean, which is in sacred geometry. But it's also, if you cut through a shell, for instance, you see that within the shell, or like with plants, the growing plants, ferns, how they create this spiral. It's beautiful. But about a week later, then appeared a triple spiral. Well, initially, I'll just tell you about this. That particular formation, over the years, I mentioned about the energy that's around the formations. This was one of those that had some of the most powerful energies that many people have experienced. It was just below Stonehenge, as I say. This is an illustration by my wife, and it was on one of the ley lines. Now, they don't all appear on ley lines, although a lot of them do. But this particular one had incredibly powerful energy, and she actually saw this. There were these sort of plumes of energy and vortexes of energy, including these little orbs of light that were in it, that were really, really powerful. And in fact, as she's shown that artwork at various different places over the years, many people have come up to us and said that that's exactly what they saw in that particular formation as well. It was that powerful an energy. So it does show there's more to this than just crushing with ropes and planks of wood, definitely. Now, so you had that single spiral, and then about a week later then appeared this formation, which is a huge formation. This is actually 1,000 feet across, about 300 metres, and it appeared not far from the other stone circle, the main stone circle at Avebury, at a place called Windmill Hill, funnily enough. But as you can see, it's huge. It actually even goes into another field beyond, but is about 1,000 feet or 300 metres from here to here. Now, this is when these were starting to become, larger and more profound, and you began to realise they were just too big to be able to create within sort of a couple of hours of darkness during the night. And in fact, from above, this one, as many, are perfect to the millimetre. And just to sort of highlight that, if you look at the central circle here, and the first 3 circles around it, from above they create a perfect equilateral triangle. And then the next 3, and the next 3, and so on and so forth, until you get to the last 3, you actually have like a spiralling vortex of equilateral triangles, getting bigger or smaller depending on how you look at it. Now, what adds even greater complexity to that is if you look at, in fact that's 2 people standing in there, just to give you an idea of how big that is. But if you notice all the little dots in the middle of these, they are all standing centres to each circle, and in fact many of them are different as well, so they're not all the same. Some is little like a circle of standing crop, others are like a fan, sometimes they're spun down into what look like little donuts or crown shapes or corn dollies, and each one can be different, and sometimes they are off-centre, so the centre of the circle is not actually in the centre. Very complex, and of course you would add so much more time to creating this if this was being done artificially. So you had the, this is 1996, you had the single spiral that I just showed, then this incredible triple spiral appeared. And then on the 13th of August 2000, on top of a hill called Milk Hill in Otten Barnes, then appeared a 6-fold spiral, and that's when this appeared, getting even more complex now. This is a huge formation. This is about 800 feet across, 200 odd metres, 250 metres. It's a huge formation, and there are over 400 circles within that formation. It actually appeared on top of a hill, as I say, called Milk Hill, but it's in a place which is sort of like the Mecca area for where many of these formations appear. They have appeared now in over 42 different countries all over the world, so it's not just the UK. But certainly 80% of the quantity as well as the quality of the formations have been appearing in this area in southern Britain, sort of south of Swindon in the counties of Wiltshire and Hampshire. But this one was so big that the media was actually quite favourable about this one, because also it's a place where throughout the summer there are people doing night watches virtually every night looking for formations appearing, but also, anomalous activity as well, balls of light and things like this. So, people are there, including the farmers as well, that are observing what's going on. But actually quite complimentary about this formation, I think because they realised it was so big and would take so long to do that, you could not create within those couple of hours of darkness. And in fact, just to give you an idea of how hard that would be, if you actually look at the central circle here, which is similar to many of the other circles, similar size, it was recognised that you would have to create each one of those circles within about 30 seconds to do that within those couple of hours of darkness. So if you look at that as an example, doing each one of these in 30 seconds, that is a photograph that I took within that central circle with the camera on a raised tripod looking down. And you can see it's absolutely huge. It's hard to grasp how big these are until you actually get within the formation, when the crop sort of comes up to about the top of your thigh. So this is just the central circle with the centre over here. That's one of the arms going out here. This is one of the other arms going out there. But it also gives you an example of the fact that they are not necessarily on flat canvas. It's not just art. The land itself is often undulating, it's very uneven, you can get clay on your boots and things like this, and yet you can go into formations that have no damage whatsoever. You can see the land dips here, and on the right it actually drops over the edge of the field, and yet from above this formation is perfect, again, to the millimetre. Now, after we'd been in that formation, we then went down to another formation in the field below, and as we were getting in there, it was getting dark. Now, while we were in there, my wife psychically felt that there was a presence within the formation with us. Not technology, but actually, a being within there. And in the direction that she could see it, she actually felt that it was like an orb. She actually saw it as an orb, but recognised it as a presence. So I actually took a picture of it in that direction to have a look, and it came out with this quite dense orb within the formation itself. Now, this was taken with an ordinary camera with ordinary film as well. This was not digital technology, which of course I'm sure you're familiar with the orbs as well, but this is prior to that, the digital side. And the orbs themselves are very much interlinked with the formations over the years. There seems to definitely be technology to the orbs as part of the creative process or as observational technology after the event. I mentioned previously the one of the formation that was being created back in 1996 where the orbs are filmed, but many other people have seen the orbs, they've filmed them. Farmers have acknowledged seeing them fly towards them and over their tractors as they're driving along. They're often seen filmed once a formation has been created, you know, flying along the top of the crop and then dropping into the formation and then flying out again on the other side. So there is a real feeling that they're part of possibly the, as I say, either the creative process or as an observational technology beyond after it actually happened. But I don't think that they are the orbs as we're seeing, you know, referred to as the sort of the more opaque orbs that people are seeing as well. This to me is something slightly different. And the orbs here, I believe, from countless research over a long period of time, certainly from sort of the mid-90s onwards, once you get rid of things like light refraction from dust, sort of snowflakes, raindrops, etc. It's looking as though what we're actually seeing are, or taking images of spirits within the dimension beyond this, the actual orb phenomena. And if it is true, and I believe it is, that there is a raise in frequency happening, and possibly what is actually happening is we're shifting up, moving more into the fourth and beyond, hopefully, that we're starting to acknowledge and see these objects or these spirits in the technology, in the dimension beyond this. Do you want to take that off? Or?
No, just leave it on.
Okay.
It's just maybe the battery.
Okay.
Just put this for the
Okay.
battery.
All right. And yet, some people say that, of course, the orbs themselves are to do with sort of failings of the CCD elements of the digital cameras, so that you can sort of discount it. But many of the images when this started to happen, which again was really in the sort of early to mid 90s, most people were still using ordinary film and ordinary cameras. Certainly the one that I just showed you was, as was this. Now, I show this one not only to highlight this information, but also this was actually taken in a place that used to be a mental hospital. A lot of torture went on there when you know what actually happened at these places. And yet it was being renovated and turned into apartments. And because of that, there was a huge amount of poltergeist activity going on at this particular place, which I've also witnessed and was a part of as well. We saw this stuff that was going on. And I think these two here are spirits, basically, are ghosts in that particular location. But as I say, there is a technology involved with the crop formations that's not necessarily the orbs, but an actual technological aspect to this. And clearly, the military are fully aware of this as well. Now, last year, on the 29th of June 2011, where we live, this is actually a picture of from where we live, in southern England, in Somerset. We were out one night watching with telescope looking at Saturn. It was a beautiful night and Saturn was really looking fantastic in the sky. As the evening progressed, we suddenly started to see more and more helicopter activity building up. South of where I live is a base called Yeovilton, which is a naval air station. So there are helicopters back and forward, but something was clearly going on because there were more and more, up to 4 or 5 helicopters flying backwards and forwards. So we began to realise this, something strange is happening. So obviously you start watching. We had the binoculars out, and at one stage I went round the side of the house and I was looking, and there are hills behind us, and a helicopter came over the hill. Was then flying sort of past the house. And as I was watching the helicopter, I suddenly noticed in front of it there was an orb flying directly in front of it. Now this is an illustration of that. That's the moon up there. And this orb was probably about that big across, about 30 metres in front, 100 feet in front of the helicopter. The helicopter was clearly chasing this object. So as I saw it, once it had sort of passed to my right, I ran round the house to tell my wife to look, so that she could see it as well. And thankfully, she'd been watching as well, and actually with the binoculars, she was looking at the orb and then obviously the helicopter, so she could see it as well. Now I highlight that because, again, in relation to crop formations, the military are clearly observing this as well, and this was also shown last night. They are, well, even though obviously UFO encounters are dismissed in mainstream, not only are they fully aware of the UFO reality, but they are also aware of much smaller objects and able to track them clearly because of the way they had built up this amount of helicopters were building up for a reason. And as I say, you see this many times in the crop formations. I've seen it, and people have filmed it as well, where these orbs are around and then helicopters appear and they actually start chasing these objects. And then the objects can fly off at phenomenal speed, sometimes returning to the point where they were originally, as if to highlight that they're there for ordinary people to observe, but so the military are fully aware of this stuff as well. But there is a more insidious side. They're not just observing. As part of the crop formation sort of for researchers over the years, many times helicopters actually come and harass people and sort of scare people out of the formations. I've seen this myself. I show this image of a gazelle just to sort of give you an example, but there's one particular formation that we went into in 1996 at the East Field, again in Alton Barnes in Wiltshire. This was the double helix DNA formation. It was a really amazing formation when it appeared. And when we first went into the formation, the mainstream media from one of the UK's leading newspapers were in there, and they interviewed us and asked us, what did we think that the formations were. We said that we believe that they are sort of a message for humanity, as I say, as an awakening process, so that people can start to wake up to the fact that something big is going on and about to happen. Anyway, and that appeared in the mainstream media. But after they had left, not long after they'd left, then suddenly one of these gazelles, military helicopters, turned up, about as close as that is if you were standing here watching it. It was so close that you could see the faces of the pilots as they were looking down at us. They knew what they were doing, and yet they were, it was terrifying. They sort of came as close as they could, and, clearly they were intimidating us. There's also one of the leading researchers at that time. She also had the same experience in that same formation. She'd been in there. She came up the hill to where her car was parked. As she was looking down onto the field below, filming this, and suddenly she heard this thundering roar, as if a train was approaching. But there are no trains in that area. And suddenly, right in front of her, one of these gazelles, literally, it had flown right underneath the hill, rose up right in front of her. I've seen the film footage, she's filming this in shock. It started to approach to her so close, the rotors were spinning just above her head, and it was kicking up all the dirt and the dust and twigs and things around her. So in fear, she just jumped into the car, through the camera, which was still filming, started the car, drove onto the road without looking, so there could have been an accident. She drove down the hill, and this helicopter then chased her down the hill, buzzing the top of her car, until eventually further down she then ended up driving off, and the helicopter sort of moved away. She's so afraid of this event that she's actually now afraid of dragonflies. I don't know if you know the insect, the ones that have the big wings that hover over ponds and things like that, because the way they fly in that erratic motion. She's actually got a fear of those now because of this. But I highlight this because, this is the stuff that you'll never hear in the mainstream media, and that this is going on, and people are being intimidated, and clearly the military are watching what's going on here. Now, there is also a complexity to the crop formations that also generally isn't highlighted to show, a very complex weave of the crop. So once again, this goes beyond just crushing with ropes and planks of wood. We've been in formations where when you look at the crop, you can see that it flows in, say, like a clockwise direction. And if you actually lift up the crop, underneath it, there is crop flowing in an anti-clockwise direction. I mean, I don't even know how you would do that. Many of the formations have crop that flows like liquid, like water, where areas come together and it sort of splashes as if two areas of water were joining. There is often like weaving, like cloth, or even plaiting, like hair. Very, very complex. But one of the first that really sort of highlighted that was this particular formation, and this appeared in 1999. It was known as the basket formation for obvious reasons, because it really looked like one of those sort of wicker baskets. In fact, this is the only photograph of that taken by Ulrich Cox, because not long after this had appeared, the farmer came into the field and actually specifically harvested that out because he didn't want people going into the crop. And this is something that does happen, but certainly has happened a lot more recently as well. Then this amazing formation appeared in 2000, July of 2000, at a place called Avebury Truslow, which is just a couple of miles away from this amazing stone circle. And this was known as the magnetic field for obvious reasons. Some of you may remember when we were at school, we used to have a piece of white paper and put iron filings on it and put a magnet underneath it, and it would actually show the magnetic field of the lines of the magnetic field from the magnet. So this is very much like that. As I say, this appeared in 2000. Now, what's interesting is that in 2001, early 2001, the Britain's editor of the UFO magazine, that amazing magazine in the UK, Graham Birdsall, who was the editor, he was given information by a guy called Graham Ennis that, and he was involved with scientists researching electrogravitics, anti-grav technology and advanced propulsion systems. He was told by Graham Ennis that scientists at NASA and elsewhere had determined that the Earth's magnetic field was imminently due to flip, and that was because it was based on their comparable satellite data that they'd studied from 1980 through to 2000. And they recognised that there are areas of fluctuating magnetic field where some of them have diminished by up to 20% over that 20-year period. So this was causing great shock within NASA. And as he said about this, within their research, they said the process of this changing magnetic field, Earth's magnetic field changing, the process has begun and is irrevocable. It's going to happen, and this is concentrating the minds at NASA more than any other project you can name. Its initial effects will manifest extreme changes in the weather, with huge global superstorms, and will probably flip by about 2020. Now that was based on their research at that time. Now to back that up, as I say, I work in the airline industry. I have spoken to pilots that say that they do often have magnetic effects within navigation that are anomalous and of concern while flying. So Graham was told at that time, this is in early 2001, not to mention this because this was a real shock, and not to put it out into mainstream, which he promised not to do until it became more widely known. And it was only in sort of 2002 this started to come out more in the mainstream that he then actually published this information. So it is interesting that in 2000, when NASA were looking at this, you had this crop formation appear, which is very much highlighting the magnetic field. Now, another thing about the magnetic field as well is, as I mentioned earlier on, the energy domes that you often see around crop formations or feel and can experience. And this is so much so that even it's been noted with birds, for instance. I know of two people that said they've seen a flock of pigeons flying towards a crop formation. And as it approached, the actual flock split into two, flew around the formation, and then reconnected beyond it and then carried on. Now, of course, pigeons, doves, use the magnetic field for navigation. So it makes sense that they could actually see there was a fluctuation in the magnetic field over that as they were actually flying over the formation. And as I mentioned as well earlier on, the fact that helicopters themselves, some of the researchers have said that the instruments go erratic as they go over them. Clearly there is an effect at a much higher level than just ground level, which also adds weight to the fact that some of these are clearly not just being created by ropes and planks of wood, as you can obviously see. And over the years, there's sort of the messages, as I say, I'm trying to highlight the fact that there's many different messages within the formations, and many of the religions have been referred to as well, from things like this. This is actually the tree of life from the Kabbalah, and this appeared in the canola, the rape crop, the yellow field. This was near Barbary Castle back in 1997, a beautiful formation. This one here that appeared in 1998 at a place called Woodborough Hill in Alton Barnes in Wiltshire. although it looks fairly simple, but as you can see from the lay of the crop, it's creating this sort of this additional image within the formation. This actually is a very powerful image within the Native American culture. And you know, some of them are saying that this particular image, when this appeared, this was in 1998, it blew them away because it actually relates to, for them, what is the equivalent of revelation. It was like, you know, once this had appeared, they knew that we were in a time the equivalent of revelation itself. And of course, this was not long after 1994, with the birth of the white buffalo calf in North America, where many of the native peoples and down into Mexico recognised the fact that that was a sign, a major sign that this was a time of transition. Now, this particular formation appeared just below the White Horse, one of these ancient white horses, that there are many of these as well in around the stone areas in southern Britain. And it appeared at a place called Cheryl. Now, it's not particularly the formation that I'm showing you, but just to the right of it, just here, about here, there is an obelisk on top of that hill, and it actually marks the spot where Marconi sent his first radio transmissions in the UK back in 1898. So it's really interesting that this area is actually the Mecca area where these formations appear around this, that we're having a communication that's going on in a place where some of the first radio transmissions actually began back in the late 1800s. So it's pretty amazing sort of synchronicity in a way. Now, this is also where this then steps up to that higher level. As I say, the crop formations began with this current era in sort of late mid-1980s and onwards into the early 90s. So after 10-15 years of people researching this, covering all the areas from geometry and mathematics, etc., people were saying, you know, something is going on. What is this? And it was in 2000 when this seemed to step up to that higher level, and sort of acknowledging the fact that this is actually a communication. So you're all aware of the SETI reality, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is the SETI program, which uses radio telescopes from around the world to listen into, hopefully, radio signals from space that give information that relate to advanced communication. And of course, the SETI program is run by NASA, and of course, NASA is run by the military. So it's fairly obvious that if we were receiving communications through the radio telescopes, that it's very unlikely that we've been given that information, that we are being communicated with, or we have contact. So a lot of people say that the very thing you would expect to receive that is showing a communication would be things like complex geometry and advanced mathematics. And of course, they're the very things that have been appearing in the fields of the world. So as if to acknowledge this, or perhaps cosmic humour, right next to this radio telescope, which is at Chilbolton, south of Andover in Hampshire, in August of 2000 appeared this formation here. Now that's the radio telescope is on government land, and in the field next to it appeared this formation. So as people started to look at this, they began to think, well, is that what it's trying to tell us, that this is a communication? But it's by putting it into the fields of the world, it allows the people of the world to look at this, and it's not actually hidden away as it would be through the sort of the mainstream. So I show you this one, and then over the next 2 years, it became very clear that this was much more than just sort of simple imagery here. It became binary code, which again you're probably familiar with, and then even photographically real images beyond that. But initially this one, you can see that it actually mimics the dish of the radio telescope with the antenna in the middle, and then this sort of graphic of like a planetary or communication on either side of the dish. And this is a close-up of that, where you can see, once again, it's like the dish of the radio telescope with the antenna, and then this sort of fairly simple, but like expressing a communication on either side of it. Now, as I say, this is where this started. This is sort of like 1D in a way. Then the following year, virtually to the day, is then when two formations appeared in the same place in the field. Now, the first one that I just showed you appeared round about here. That's where the radio telescope. So within this one, there were two formations. The one at the top, which is very much like a face, either human or humanoid, and the other one, which is pointing straight at the radio telescope, is based on that binary code message that was sent into space by the SETI program themselves back in November 1974. as a communication into space. So it's like a reply to that, but of course there are anomalies within the formation, and that is exactly what you would look for if you were looking for a communication. So I'll highlight those in a second, but initially if you look at the face, in fact the further back you are, if you squint your eyes, it becomes more 3D. This is like modern newspaper, black and white newspaper, where you have white paper with black dots. If you look at it closely, it's hard to see the image, but as you pull away, you'll then see the image of a person that you recognise from those black dots on newspaper. It's made of hundreds of circles of standing crop, ranging from probably this is just one corner of that, just to give you an example, hundreds of circles ranging from probably about a foot across here, these probably about 4 feet across. But the crop itself is not crushed, it's not snapped or broken, it's actually flowing like liquid within those circles. So you have that, and then the other one that appeared next to it, which is this. This is about 250 feet in length and made up once again of hundreds of squares and oblongs of standing crop. From the ground level, you haven't got any idea what that is. It's only from the aerial overview that you actually can see what that is. Now, as I say, this was based on this binary code message that was sent back in November 1974 into space from the huge Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico. I mean, this is huge. This is built into a dish within the mountain. That's a helicopter landing pad there. These are the admin buildings, just to give you an idea of the size of this place. And this 2D, in effect, binary code message was sent into space. And I'll just give you an idea of the information that was within that. On the right is the translation of the binary code message that was sent into space. And on the left is the block form of that. So you can compare that with the crop formation in a second. But just to highlight some of the areas within it, initially at the bottom, there was a little mini graphic of the Arecibo radio telescope showing the dish with the antenna. Above it, there was the solar system with the third planet out raised up, which of course is planet Earth, showing that this is the planet with life in it. Above that was then the humanoid figure, us, we live on that planet. Other things as well, like the double helix of DNA. There were numbers of nucleotides in DNA, the formulas for bases, for sugars and bases in nucleotides of DNA, atomic numbers for oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, etc. This was an intelligent communication sent into space. So if you look at this, the block form, which is here, and now if you zigzag backwards and forwards at the actual crop formation, as you look at it, you start to see more and more anomalies within that formation. And like in a contact situation, that is exactly what you would look for. You would look for the anomalies to see what they're trying to say. Now, once again, there are many within that, but I'll just highlight a few. One classic example is the DNA structure is different. And certainly when you look at the hybridization program, where genetic material taken from people mixed with the genetic material certainly from the greys, a new hybrid race being created, this is being acknowledged, and that there is a different DNA structure within those beings. So this is pointing to that. There's also, instead of the human figure, you have below that what is a little mini graphic of a grey, for instance, with the large head, the big eyes and the small body. And below that, so instead of the human figure, you've got what is a grey. Below that, in the area that is showing the planet with life, the third planet out, you can see there are 3 areas raised up. So not only the Earth, which as we know is abundant, or used to be abundant with life. In the middle, you have Mars. And Mars, even from Viking Orbiter back in 1976, showed that Mars itself used to have vast rivers, lakes and oceans on it. There are photographs of what looked like vegetation on Mars that actually expands in the summer and contracts in the winter. And there are also anomalies, certainly at the Cydonia region, of what look like pyramidal structures. And there are geologists that have actually looked at these and said that they look artificial. They don't believe they're from natural wind erosion. So clearly there is or was life on Mars. And beyond that, you've got the 4 dots there that probably relate to the 4 Galilean moons around Jupiter. So once again saying, certainly Europa, the ice world, many microbiologists believe that there is life under the liquid water of Europa. So this is highlighting the fact there's more just within our own solar system of life, let alone anywhere else in the galaxy or cosmos. And then at the bottom, there is the pièce de résistance of the formation itself. There is a little mini graphic at the bottom of the formation that appeared there the year before, the one that I just showed you, which has the like the dish in the middle, and then with this sort of cosmic or planetary communication on either side. So the original message showed the Arecibo telescope as that it was sent from there. What people felt this formation was trying to do, as well as all the information, was to say that ETs are already here on Earth. And indeed they are. Now, you've just seen the other one. As if that's not enough, this has now taken this to a 2D, a binary code level. Then the following year, virtually to the day, just 8 miles down the road, underneath now a bank of microwave towers, and the SETI program's looking into the microwave spectrum as well as the radio spectrum, is when this one here appeared. The microwaves are just up here off screen. And I'll just give you an idea of this while I'm talking about this. That's a car parked there. So it gives you an idea of the size of these formations. That particular one is about 350 feet in length. And it's now stepped up to this higher level, more like a photographically real image, three-dimensional. And in fact, it's not running in line with the tram lines. The tram lines, of course, are where the tractors spray the crops. They're about roughly 25 meters apart, 80 odd feet between each tram line. And so it's not running in line with that. It's just made, the image itself is just made up of many, many lines of depressed crop that create like this photographic image. And once again, the further back you are, or if you squint your eyes slightly, it brings out the more 3D aspect of it. Even what is incredible, if you notice, on the left-hand side, it's even like shading of the cheek. I mean, that part of it, I don't even know how that was part of the process, of the creative process, to actually create shading like you would in a real photograph. Behind his shoulder are possibly, they are meant to represent 3 UFOs in the distance. But what's incredible about this, of course, is the disk itself. Now, this appeared around about the 25th anniversary of the Voyager probe, the one that went out into space that had that golden disc on board with people speaking, music playing, children talking, which was, of course, of a communication if that probe was discovered by ETs out in space. Now, some people say that the disk itself is made up of circles, but it is actually much more complex than that. It is actually a spiral of crop that flows from the centre of that all the way out and eventually comes to the bottom there, and it comes out underneath there, flowing in an anti-clockwise direction. Now, I walked that, and it took me about 15 or 20 minutes to walk at normal speed. So that, if you straightened that out, that would be the equivalent of about a mile in length, or 1.5 k's in length. It's a huge thing. On a sloping field, which it is, quite a steeply sloping field, you'd have a job to create a spiral like that in a computer, let alone on a sloping field at night, just with ropes and planks of wood. And yet that's only part of it. What's even more amazing is, if you notice the dark areas of the formation, they're all standing crop, and the light areas are all laid crop. So wherever you are within that spiral, it's not random or haphazard, they all point into the centre. So all of the laid areas literally point into the centre of the formation itself. It's staggeringly complex. So people felt that what he was doing, he was actually holding up a disk, as a communication. So using the ASCII code in the computer, this was translated, and supposedly it comes up with this. It says, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing." Now, these are really powerful words. And there are a lot of people, over these years of research and interactions and experiences, there are many people that feel that the Greys, as one example of ETs, and there are many, are here to help us as we go through these changes, technological changes, environmental changes. Other people feel that the greys themselves are, in a way, like the message. They are not here to help us. They are possibly deceivers. They are here taking genetic material, possibly manipulating things from behind the scenes, and not to be trusted. Now, I personally would go along with the latter from my own research on this, and I would not trust these beings. But as I say, this is a very multifaceted subject, and I think as this subject's going to come out more very soon, you know, people are going to start to make decisions about these things from their own heart and their own experiences. But I think we have to be honest about looking at the various types of beings that are involved here, and you know, and what their agendas are. So this is an amazing sort of message within the formations. Now, what's fascinating is at that Chilbolton telescope where the originals appeared. Recently, actually, up to by September 2010, there was a whole new array. They've put a whole new SETI array there. It's not a dish. It's made of dipoles that are linking in with other radio telescopes throughout Europe to have this sort of blanket radio telescope covering the whole of Europe, and obviously linking into the rest of the world as well. And in fact, they're more like a HARP array rather than radio telescope dishes. But they're very, very sensitive. They're not only used as part of the SETI program to listen to signals coming in, but they're also, they can detect things, they can track satellites, and of course, because of that, they can track objects, but also things as fine as dust in the atmosphere, and for weather, to recognise weather patterns as well. So this is complex stuff being partly used for SETI program, but probably for other things as well. So it's interesting that probably the most important communication that happened globally as far as this type of SETI communication, they've now got a massive SETI array operating at that area. Now, another thing the formations have done over the years is the recognition of life forms. And one of those formations that appeared that many people felt was linking into that was this one. This appeared on the 4th of August in 2003, just below one of those white horses in a beautiful field below that in that sort of Mecca area in Wiltshire, Alton Barnes. And this particular one is believed to be representing the swallows, which are those birds that fly along still water like ponds or rivers and actually take insects or water, and you get these droplets of water coming off their beak or their wings. What's amazing is where this appeared, you can sort of see it with this image, it was actually, the field itself dips really steeply into the bottom, and it's quite steep in there as you look down at it, and it really did look as though the birds were actually flying down into that dip and then flying out the other side. When you look down from the hill above, it was really beautiful. But as I say, a lot of people were inspired to think that this formation was trying to highlight that we need to look at life forms and be aware of, you know, the natural world as well. That certainly applied with this particular one. This appeared on the 29th of May 2009, this huge jellyfish. It's absolutely massive. This is about 600 feet long, which is probably, 180 metres, something like that. But it appeared right next to yet another ancient site, which is just up here. It's called Wayland Smithy. It's an ancient burial mound east of the city of Swindon in Wiltshire. Again, people were feeling that this particular formation was saying, you know, not only sort of land life, but also look at your oceans as well, including the jellyfish. This is something that I'm going to highlight tomorrow at the talk tomorrow, about the fact that the changes that are happening in the natural world are not only devastating, but there's also some incredible things and strange things happening, which, as I say, I'll talk about tomorrow. But regarding the jellyfish as well, this is not only aquatic, but it's the fact that many people have also said that they've actually seen what is like jellyfish in the skies of the world. And you saw earlier on, of course, Carlos Diaz, the yellowy-orange plasma craft that I showed you earlier on, which many people call a jellyfish craft. And it's as though these are, in some cases, are like these, they're actually using the atmosphere. They're much finer than normal, and than you'd have, say, like in the ocean. And the atmosphere is like an ocean to these beings. They're much finer, harder to see or detect, and yet they are there. Many people, you've probably seen a lot of footage from Mexico particularly, where in some cases what look like jellyfish are in the sky, and they're actually birthing these orbs that are coming out of them, seen from different angles as well. sometimes more orbs are coming out of them than actually the size of the object itself. So that is really weird as well. They've been seen in various places around the world, including this. This is an illustration from objects that were seen in Cape Town, where there was this huge, once again, like a jellyfish object, and these other orbs, but they were more than just sort of standard orbs. People felt it was like a plankton, literally an illuminated plankton that was flying around. I also know someone who saw, they were living in Slough, which is west of London, and they actually said they saw a huge manta ray, like they have in the ocean, the ones that sort of fly, beautiful creature, flying through the sky over the city. This person would never lie, I assure you, who saw this. And yet again, she said it was very transparent. You could actually see through it. It's as though it was sort of, as you would expect, like a jellyfish, but in the sky. And you've got the stuff in Mexico, but you've also got the SETI footage as well. The space shuttle footage. The classic one, of course, in relation to this was the footage from 1996 from the STS-75. The footage where they were towing the space shuttle was towing that tether behind it. They were dragging behind, and eventually it snapped, and this tether then moved away. Once it was about 100 miles, 150 k's behind the space shuttle itself, as they were filming it, suddenly space around it seemed to fill with what looked like jellyfish, basically. One of them was so big that as it actually flew in front of the tether, and with distance, they actually calculated that it was probably about 5 miles across, or 8 kilometres across, this object. Now, again, what that does to me is to show that there's so much more to life than just what we see here with our own ordinary senses, and that it's not just the life forms that we know on Earth and in the oceans, but there are finer life forms that exist in the atmosphere, but also out into space as well. And I think that applies throughout the cosmos, that this is teeming with life, and it's very special, which is why there's obviously concern at what we're doing on the planet at this time. Now, you're all aware, of course, of the Mexican footage, the Mexican experiences that have been going on, particularly that began in 1991. And this is when, on the 11th of July 1991, during the total solar eclipse, thousands, millions of people were out in Mexico City watching the eclipse as it went dark, when UFOs appeared in the skies over Mexico. This was filmed and photographed by many, many people. And this began this new wave of UFO interactions, incredible interactions that have been happening, particularly in South America. Now, it was only after this had occurred that I actually realised that what happened with this one is that it actually fulfilled a 1,200-year-old ancient Mayan prophecy that said, on the birth of that particular sun, as it came out from behind the eclipse, it was going to herald the dawn of a new age of cosmic awareness as the masters of the stars will return to Earth, and it would herald this new age of cosmic awareness and of Earth changes. And of course that's exactly what's happened since 91 onwards. There are more and more people have been waking up to this sort of cosmic reality. The crop formations have become more and more complex, giving communications. People are aware of the UFO ET reality, but also Earth changes have increased more and more. The things that we're seeing now, up to tsunami, volcanoes, etc. So it was literally like this ancient prophecy was fulfilled. This, of course, then stimulated interest within the crop formation world as well. And one of the leading researchers in Mexico, of course, is Jaime Maussan, which you're all familiar with, I'm sure. Brilliant researcher. And he was seeing that some of these formations were starting to highlight aspects within the Mayan reality. So when this appeared, this formation here, and the one that I'll show you next to it, when they appeared this one was on the 9th of August 2005, and then the next one was on the 13th of August 2005. These appeared in two fields next to each other, just by Wayland Smithy, the place that I just showed you that had that jellyfish, so near an ancient site as well. He had experts in Mayan look at these formations. When he realised the information that was contained within them, he immediately flew from Mexico City to the UK to come and look at these because they were so important to him. Now the information within this one, it relays the December 2012 alignment of Earth with the Sun, with the Pleiades star system and the galactic centre. But also within it, there is information that relates to the annular eclipse of 20th of May 2012, which happened, of course, and was seen as it completed its cycle in Mexico. The transit of Venus over the Sun on the 6th of June 2012, but also a possible bridge between the different religions as well, between Christianity, Islam, and the native peoples of the world. So this is a really important communication. Now, the other formation, which appeared just in the field next to it, was this one. And information within that relates to the return of Quetzalcoatl, the return of the Messiah, and within it are the words Christ, Messiah, catastrophe, eclipse, life, and God, which are powerful words, of course. Now, this again was in 2005, as people were projecting obviously forward to 2012 this time, as a major transitional point. Now, 10 years before that, in 1995, this formation appeared at a place called Petersfield in Hampshire, and it was relating to the orbits of the planets around the Sun, quite accurately the way it's depicted, where in the middle you have the Sun, and then you have the elliptical orbit of Mercury, then Venus, then the Earth, then Mars, then the asteroid belt, before you go on to Jupiter and Saturn beyond, etc. So back then, when this appeared, this was impressive in the sense that the orbits themselves are standing crop; they're not indented, which at that time was difficult to do. If these were being created by ropes and planks of wood, it's much easier to indent the orbit rather than it is to have the orbit standing. But also, if you notice, the third orbit out, the orbit of the Earth, actually doesn't depict a planet. So you can imagine the debate that raged as to what that's trying to say when this appeared. Some people felt that it was trying to say that we are going through an environmental collapse, and this is really sort of catastrophic. Other people felt that what it was trying to say was that the planet herself is about to go through a transformation, a bit like an ascension process that happened to Christ, where the planet would go to a higher dimension and not be visible on the third dimensional plane, which a lot of people feel that that's what this time is about. So it's interesting you have this sort of debate that raged as to what that actually meant. So going back to 2005 again, around a similar time as the other two formations appeared, this one appeared. And what looked like three triangles in the middle are actually three sevens. And in numerology, 777 relates to the ascension process as I say, ascending to a higher dimension. But with the main imagery around the outside, once again people felt that it was trying to say that we are heading towards a sort of an ascension transformation. Now, that, in a way, was highlighted by this incredible crop formation as well that appeared. This appeared on the 7th of July 2007 in the East Field in Alton Barnes. It's a huge formation. It's about 300 metres, 1,000 feet across from here to here. That up the top are two people walking down the tram line, so it gives you an idea of the size of this. And 500 feet width. It appeared during the middle of the night. In a very short space of time. I know one of the witnesses, the guy that had the cameras, and he had an infrared camera that was filming this. They were doing a night watch. This is in a place where most of the profound formations have appeared, and anomalous activity like balls of light, helicopter interactions as well. So they were doing the night watch. As they watched that field, there was nothing there. It got dark. This is right in the middle of the summer, so we only have a couple of hours of darkness. And basically, once it became light again, that formation was there. In actual fact, there was only about an hour and a half time to create that without being seen. What is amazing is that during the middle of that, there was a huge flash of light that illuminated the whole of the valley and became like daylight for a single moment. It actually sent an electromagnetic spike into his infrared camera, so he, something had happened. And then he actually filmed, I've seen his film footage of the formation appearing. It took about 9 seconds as it started collapsing within the infrared camera. So it's an amazing formation. Again, the field flows, it goes up, drops down, it flows up here, then drops down and then goes to the right. Yet from above, it is perfect to the millimetre. But more than that, it's actually, if you look at it from this side here, looking up, it actually creates like a number 3 that is actually based on the Om symbol. And Om relates to the total consciousness of God. Everything there ever was, is and shall be, from waking consciousness to sleeping consciousness to dreaming consciousness. On top of that, it appeared on the 7th of July 2007, which again is 777. So you have a formation here, 1,000-foot, 300-metre formation that appears during the middle of the night in a flash of light that actually relates to the consciousness of God and to ascension. This is starting to step right up to a high level now. This followed on the following year when this formation appeared. This appeared on the 15th of August 2008 near a place called Etchillhampton, a beautiful Celtic crucifix. It's absolutely staggering. Once again, it's perfect to the millimetre. It's hard to grasp how, when you see a precise formation, that from the ground level it's virtually impossible to see what they are. And yet this formation itself it actually looks like it's been laser cut in a wood block. It's that precise, this one. And this is an image of it in the ground, so you can see elongated, so you can see what it's like. It's a huge formation. It's about 600 feet, what's that, 180 metres, 800 feet, over 250 metres in length. It's huge. It's the equivalent of 2.5 football pitches in length, that formation. But it's not running in line with the tram lines, if you notice, where they're, again, here. That little black dot in the middle is a person standing in the middle of that central circle. And yet we went into that not long after it appeared, and the crop itself was actually, even though it looked sort of really crisp, the crop was standing at about a foot off the ground. So when you stepped into it, it sort of felt blasphemous in a way, like walking in new clean snow, which you guys know all about. And you feel like you're sort of spoiling the beauty of the snow. Amazing. Now also highlighting numerology, with the one I just spoke about, this one itself, it actually points to a compass bearing of 222 degrees. And in numerology, again, 222 is a number that relates to a cosmic Christ consciousness. So not only like a Christ consciousness, but one that relates to awareness of cosmic reality as well. Now, what is truly staggering is that when this appeared, at the same time in the States, there was a conference being held on the Turin Shroud. Now, I haven't got time to go into this, but it's another thing that I've studied for a couple of decades. I've researched in depth the Turin Shroud, and I give lectures on that as well. And undeniably now, the evidence points to the fact that the shroud is genuine. As I say, unfortunately, I haven't got time to go into that. But, and this is a profound thing as well, when you then had this crop formation appearing at the very same time as this international conference was being held in the States, with many of the speakers there were the original STURP team, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, that did the original scientific research back in 1978, and came to the conclusion then that the shroud was real. So this is, interlinking with this, sort of these higher levels as well, the crop formations now. And of course, mathematics. I said about complex geometry and advanced mathematics. This was something that initially people were seeing, and they knew that something was going on, because some of the mathematics that were part of this were blowing mathematicians away. They were seeing forms of mathematics that they hadn't seen before. But this was, of course, the classic when this appeared. This appeared in 2000, once again near Barbary Castle. And that fort that I showed you earlier is just up here. That's part of the ancient settlement. And this relates to pi. It was so perfect when it appeared, it just again blew people away. It perfectly depicts pi. So if you look at the 3 dots, if you actually, from that into the centre, that creates 1/10 of the areas of that. And as you go round, you then have 10 segments basically from that. And unfortunately, I haven't got the numbers here, but it spells out exactly, the cogs of that spell out exactly the numbers of pi. So from the middle, it covers 3 segments, go 3.1, I think it's 419 or something. Anyway, so I haven't got the numbers. Each of those come all the way out until eventually you get to the end where it then says recurring, perfect to the millimetre. Absolutely staggering. How you do that with ropes and planks of wood in a field of barley is amazing. But I show that as well because complexity is something that's been a part of the crop formations. As I mentioned earlier on, it isn't just being crushed or laid, or even with advanced technology, which many of these are, with balls of light where the crop collapses. It's the fact that there's a complex weave of some of the crop that actually blow your mind when you see them. And this is a classic example of that. This is known as the Owl Formation that appeared at Woodborough Hill in Alton Priors in Wiltshire. And of course the owl within the New Age is regarded as a wise being. The owl itself is often a mask for the Greys in the abductions because of the black eyes. Also the references to the Watchers, the ancient Watchers on Earth as well. So it's a powerful sort of symbol. But it's also the fact that if you look around the edge of this, what are like feathers. There are 90 feathers all around there. That's a person or a couple of people standing in the middle. Gives you an idea. This is just laid crop. Can you imagine if you're standing there, you haven't got a clue what that is. It's only from the air that you see that they are like feathers. And this another one is known as the Mayan headdress, which also relates to Mayan prophecy as well. This appeared just below the ancient burial mound or sacred mound at Silbury Hill in Wiltshire. Just up here in the north is the Avebury Stone Circle, and in the south down here is Stonehenge. So this is a really sort of central area. As I say, Mayan feathered headdress. This is the A4 road. That's a car with a caravan. Gives you an idea of the size of these things. A man in there with his dog. But also, it actually has the way the crop is actually woven and laid. So when the light catches it, is very much, as you see the images within Mayan culture as well, on the actual crop itself. And then this one, I love this one. This appeared in 2009 at a place called Martinsell Hill, and it's once again, it's perfect to the millimetre from the air, and yet it's only within the wheat crop and not within the grass field that's next to it. It literally stops right at the edge here. I actually call it the wheat from the chaff for that obvious reason. But what is amazing, there was one photograph that was taken, an aerial photograph, that within that field there, not long after it had appeared, within that field there were cows eating the grass. And within this photograph, at the very place where, if that arm continued and you had the last circle there, the cows themselves were actually standing in a circle in the perfect place where that circle would be if it had continued within the field. So it's as though they were actually, recognising the energy again, but within the field. It's an amazing picture. Very complex again. Not only the main circles as you see there, but lots of other small circles with standing crop in each of those as well. But as I say, the wheat from the chaff and the different fields as well. I've seen this several times over the years, sort of 18 years of looking at this, where this has happened as well, at other times where it's only the crop itself that is laid and not other things like standing weeds or other crops from a previous year, or poppies and things like that, are often left standing, but only the crops, say like the wheat or the barley or the oats, that are actually laid. It's quite incredible. And this is an example of that. This is from a formation that I believe was a genuine formation that appeared in 2003. Once again, Woodborough Hill in that sort of Mecca area in Wiltshire. That is actually a bunch of weeds that were within the formation itself, and the rest of it was laid except for this one area of standing crop. So, as I've seen this, and other people have spoken of this as well, it begs the question, what's going on here? When you look at again, hoaxing aside, you look at the genuine formations, and in many cases they seem to be being able to be created by this technology, either ufological or the balls of light themselves, the orbs. Are they able to work with crop specific? Are they crop specific? Can they actually work with the actual type of crop and ask for that to lay with the technology to make it lay, or even a request? I mean, that's taking it obviously to the furthest level when they can actually ask for only for the wheat rather than the weeds, etc. But it has happened enough times, and I've heard it from enough people. It is as though the technology itself can denote the type of species of plant that is laid, which is pretty impressive stuff. Now, moving forward to 2010, to me, probably the most impressive formations that appeared in 2010 were these two. This was further east than they normally appear. This was in West Berkshire, sort of coming west of London, and they were on either side of the M4 motorway, which is one of the UK's busiest motorways. And you had this formation here that appeared on this side, which is actually like the face of Christ on the Turin shroud. And on the other side is like the back of the head image on the shroud as well. But because they're on either sides of the motorway, it's literally like it's trying to denote that one is the front and one is the back. Now, also in a second, I'll just highlight the fact that just up the road here, there are two villages which I think are very important to this subject as well. So this appeared in 2010, in the same year that the Turin shroud was actually being exhibited in Turin over a 43-day period. So it's like a semi-acknowledgement of that reality. Now, initially, if you look at the face, again, it's very, on the shroud itself is very basic, the positive image, but it's when you look at the negative that you actually see the three-dimensional image, like photographically real image, where you have this one with the crops spiralling in one direction, and then across the motorway, you see the motorway there. The other one, which is like the back of the head area, very much like the shroud, and the circles of crop are flowing in another direction, the opposite direction, as if, again, denoting sort of front and back. Here, where you have like the blood flow areas, which you do on the shroud itself. When those two are put together, it becomes more realistic. When you actually overlay them, it looks more like the face, the positive image of the face, which is impressive. Now, I mentioned two villages just up the road from this, where this appeared. It appeared near a place called Wickham. On the other side of the road, up the road, is rather interesting, whether this has got anything to do with this or not, but I'll come to that in a sec, sorry. Just to show you this. This was the actual exposition of the Turin shroud. This was a 43-day period from April into May at the cathedral in Turin. There was something like 2 million pilgrims went to see the shroud from all over the world. But what is interesting, it was actually believed to have been, it would have been a lot more than that, but that was actually when that volcano was going off in Iceland that actually stopped all air traffic within Europe. So there probably would have been many more people that would have got to that if that hadn't been happening. So anyway, the villages, as I say, that are just up the road, which is quite interesting. One of them is actually called that, World's End, which now whether these formations are trying to highlight this aspect of reality is hard to say. Next to it is another village called Peasmore, and in Peasmore is a military base, and there is a deep underground military base there. There are witnesses that have come out that said that they were involved with what they call PGLFs, which are programmable generated life forms. These are using ET DNA as well to create like a hybrid but sort of robotic beings. So this again is another military base. There are many in the UK. Tim's fully aware of all the different bases, of course. Some of them, this one often was referred to as sort of Britain's Area 51, where some of this goes on. So a formation sort of outside of its normal area, straddling the motorway, with these two different villages nearby as well, highlighting these other areas of reality may be relevant. Now, sort of coming up to date now, over the last couple of years, from 2011, 2012, I believe that the vast majority of formations are hoaxed, to be honest. Not all of them, don't get me wrong, but most of them. Many of the mainstream researchers that have been involved in this from sort of the early days, from early 90s onwards, felt that the formations started to sort of fade out in 2010. And although that seems sad if you're involved with this, particularly as we're sort of projecting forward to 2012, December 2012, and possibly beyond that, it seemed sad in a way that you felt that the crop formation should carry on with this dramatic continuance through. But what it actually did is, in a way, actually allowed, because so many of them were being hoaxed, it actually allowed for, like in a revelation, a revealing, many of the hoax formations to be seen for what they were. So by the more impressive, profound formations not happening, and you start to have more and more hoax formations, which I believe all of these are hoaxed, it actually allowed people to see, the wood from the trees, as we say. So you could see, what was going on. What was happening, of course, is that some genuine formations that are appearing, the hoaxes have become, it wasn't just guys with ropes and planks of wood or guys from pubs after a few drinks going out. This was serious stuff, even from the early days, often highly financed groups by, often by the media actually, that highlights them. I've seen this myself personally, where mainstream media will not interview, this is the BBC, will not interview the genuine researchers, but they work with the hoaxers and then pay money to have these formations created, to muddy the waters. So over this last couple of years, in a way, it's given us an opportunity to see how many hoaxes there are, but also many of the formations that are hoaxed, there are great and elaborate write-ups within crop formation websites that say how incredible the geometry is, or the reason it was created, what it relates to, and it seems very impressive, but actually it's still a hoaxed formation. So I think with those 2 years, as I say, it cleared the way for us to see what was going on as part of this revealing that's happening. And this, of course, applies in other areas. We're starting to see, the true nature of reality in other areas as well. However, for this year anyway, to me, this is the final sort of formation. One of the most impressive that appeared this year, which I believe is genuine, was when this one appeared. This is an incredible formation. This appeared again underneath one of those ancient white horses at a place called Hackpen Hill. Beautiful formation, very precise to the millimetre again, and even, as you can see, I spoke about the complex weave of the crop. The fact that the crop itself around the edge inside here is actually woven like cloth, very complex. It's what I believe that's trying to say, because I think most of the genuine formations all had a message. It wasn't for art and art, the sake of art. The real formations all had a message, which is why a lot of them you could say, if there's no message, then what is the point? If we're being communicated with, which I think we are. This one, I believe, it relates to nanotechnology, and it's a warning of nanotechnology that's invading the cells now. This is out there, this is being unleashed in our clothing and our food, very scary. And nanotechnology is a technology that's at least 70 times smaller than a red blood cell. And this is scary stuff. So to me, this is being highlighted with that, where it's trying to highlight like fractal, which is what it is in a way, nanotechnology, entering into a cell. And you can see the way there's that very fine line there, as though it's actually penetrated in there. Now, I actually walked some of that line there. That line is so narrow that it's actually less than the width of your hip when you're walking in there. So, there's only literally a few strands of crop. Again, how you would do that, walking like that with a rope or, poles and things like that, without it being wiggly, I don't know, it's quite incredible. And this is another one that sort of gives you an overview of it, just to highlight that. This is within the field. Once again, there are ancient sites up at the top here. This one, clearly, you can see the light on the weave of the crop. Also, as I mentioned, nanotechnology is being used in clothes for intelligent clothing, to even change colour, or, so dirt falls off it and stuff. But this is being washed into the rivers and the oceans, a real problem. Okay, this is the last slide. As you can see, what I've tried to do with this presentation is to show this journey really from the early 90s right through to now, which has been incredible. Clearly there is a hoaxing element to this, and a lot of it has been muddied, but even some of the hoaxers themselves have actually said that they've seen anomalous phenomena like the balls of light or the military interactions and things like that, even though they're hoaxing some of the formations. The genuine formations, which most of those that I've shown today I believe are, they're trying to get a message across. And I think that they're trying to say that the fact that we are at this incredible time of change, something is coming, and you can have faith and believe in that. That's what it certainly did for me. At times when you would sort of doubt, is this really a transitional point? Is something going to happen? The one thing the crop formations did, as well as all the other things that are going on around the world, is that it sort of gave you a foundation to recognise the fact that yes, something is happening. There is help for us and guidance, and you can keep faith with that we are at this time. So I think there's some incredible things about to happen over the next months, possibly 6 months or a year or so. Some incredible changes coming, and to me they've definitely given me the faith to keep going looking at these things. Thank you very much.